All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute deepest, darkest secret behind, let's be honest, perhaps the most iconic fantasy villains of all time. When you think of a dark, sprawling fantasy army, you instantly picture them, right? The Orcs. Brutal, relentless, and seemingly born just for malice. But what if I told you that their true origin story is actually far more heartbreaking than you ever realized? We are going to uncover a real cosmic tragedy today. So we're kicking things off right in the thick of it with this massive, fundamental question. Why did the first Dark Lord, Melkor, create the orcs in the first place? We so often think of them merely as mindless foot soldiers, just grunts in a grand evil conquest. But their creation, it wasn't just some clever military strategy. The answer to this question fundamentally changes how we view these creatures, entirely shifting them from simple monsters to something infinitely more tragic. The source material actually doesn't mince words here. It says, "This, it may be, was the vilest deed of Melkor and the most hateful to Iluvatar." Just let the gravity of that statement sink in for a second. Melkor committed absolutely countless atrocities. He literally shattered continents. He completely ruined the world's first golden age. And yet, out of all that, the creation of the orcs is singled out as his absolute vilest deed, the one single act most hateful to the Supreme Creator. To really grasp why this specific atrocity holds such terrible weight, we have to hit rewind. We need to go back to the very beginning, right to the awakening of the Elves. Okay, let's dive into this early timeline. Before the Elves even woke up, the world was basically sitting in this state of permanent twilight. The divine beings, the Valar, held a council because they were deeply troubled. The lands of Middle-earth were totally dark and crawling with evil things Melkor had bred. So, Varda, the Queen of the Stars, steps up. She takes the silver dews from the glowing tree Telperion and begins the absolute greatest labor of the Valar, creating brilliant new stars just to challenge Melkor's darkness. And it was in that exact hour, right under those brand new stars, that the Elves first awoke. But here is the ultimate tragedy. Melkor, who literally never slept and was always watching, discovered them first. It's honestly heartbreaking when you look at the stark contrast between what the Valar intended and what Melkor actually did. The Valar wanted the Elves, the firstborn children, to wake up to a world of starlight, wonder, and total freedom. They just wanted to protect them. But Melkor? He introduced shadows, terror, and captivity before the Valar even realized the Elves were awake. He completely hijacked this beautiful, pristine awakening and poisoned their very first experiences in the world. And this corruption wasn't just some overnight magic spell. It was this incredibly insidious, step-by-step psychological and physical terror campaign. First, he sends out evil spirits just to spy on them. Then, he starts spreading these lying, paranoid whispers among the Elves. It got so bad that when the Vala Oromë the Hunter finally found them, a lot of the Elves were terrified of him. Why? Because Melkor had planted rumors of a dark rider who would snatch them away in the night. And the worst part? That rumor was grounded in a terrifying reality. If any elf strayed too far, Melkor's forces would waylay them, kidnap them, and drag them off into the dark. Which begs the question, where were these kidnapped elves actually taken? Well, they were dragged to Utumno. This was Melkor's original absolute nightmare of a fortress in the north, dug impossibly deep into the earth. The history here is chillingly clear. We will honestly never know the full darkness of what happened down in those pits, but we do know this. Those captured elves were thrown into prison, and through, quote, slow arts of cruelty, they were corrupted and enslaved. It was a methodical, torturous breaking of both their physical bodies and their spirits. Now, this brings us to a really fascinating mystery. Think about it. If Melkor was so incredibly powerful, we're talking about a godlike being who could raise mountain ranges and command legions of Balrogs. Why go through this horrific, excruciatingly slow process of kidnapping and torturing elves? Why not just snap his fingers and magically create his own loyal army out of the mud or the shadows? So the crucial point is this central limitation. Ever since his original rebellion, way before the beginning of the world, Melkor had completely lost the ability to make anything that had true life of its own. He couldn't even make a convincing fake. He could pervert things, sure. He could twist them, he could mock them, but he could not create. He fundamentally lacked that divine flame needed to spark independent life. So to build an army that could actually multiply and sustain itself, he needed raw material that already possessed the spark of life. He literally needed the elves. And here is the dark, sickening culmination of that limitation. The text tells us, "Thus did Melkor breed the hideous race of the Orcs in envy and mockery of the Elves." The Orcs were never just soldiers to him. They were quite literally a biological weapon, forged out of pure cosmic jealousy. He took the very beings that the Supreme Creator loved the most, and he systematically twisted them into a shape of dread, entirely just to mock the Valar and spit on everything good in the world. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, devastating scale of the tragedy. Just look at the comparison. The Firstborn elves were beautiful, eternally youthful, possessing a grace beyond any other living thing, and they inherently revered the starlight. The Orcs, by devastating contrast, were intentionally bred to be hideous, fully corrupted, and lived their entire existences in absolute misery and darkness. They are the ultimate twisted reflection. Every single time Melkor looked at an orc, he wasn't just looking at a soldier. He was looking at his own spiteful victory over beauty. Now, as you can imagine, once the Valar actually realized the extent of Melkor's shadow and what was happening to the elves, their reaction was absolute. They had lived in peace for ages. But Manwë, the chief of the Valar, basically said enough is enough. He declared they would take up the mastery of the world at whatsoever cost to deliver the elves. They mobilized the entire might of the West and marched straight for the north. And Melkor himself? He never, ever forgot that this catastrophic war was waged purely for the sake of the elves. This all builds into a genuinely apocalyptic climax. The resulting conflict, the Battle of the Powers, was so intensely violent that it literally broke the world. The very shape of Middle-earth was shattered. The Great Sea grew incredibly wide and deep, carving massive new gulfs into the continent. Utumno was besieged, its massive iron gates completely broken, its deep halls literally unroofed to the sky. And Melkor himself was wrestled to the ground and bound in the great chain Anganor. All of this world-shattering destruction happened as a direct response to his vile deeds against the elves. But amidst all this cosmic war and world-breaking magic, we really need to pause and look closely at the orcs themselves. Yes, Melkor warped them to serve him, to fight his wars, to literally be the bitterest foes of their own uncorrupted kin. But psychologically speaking, how did this corruption actually take hold? Deep in their dark hearts, did the orcs actually feel any kind of loyalty or love for the Dark Master who forged them? The answer to that is perhaps the most tragic revelation of this entire explainer. Deep in their dark hearts, the orcs actually loathed the master whom they served. They served him entirely out of fear. He was the maker only of their misery, and they hated him for it. They weren't just mindless, unfeeling robots. They retained just enough awareness to absolutely despise the being who ruined them. They fought for him not out of devotion, but out of an all-consuming, terrified enslavement. Knowing this, we really have to ask ourselves, when we look at the orcs, are we just looking at monsters waiting to be slain? Or are we looking at the greatest, most heartbreaking victims in the history of this entire fantasy world? I'll leave you to think on that.